Welcome to the Thames Valley Cancer Alliance Health and Wellbeing series. At the Cancer Alliance, we work with colleagues across the Thames Valley, covering Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire and parts of Wiltshire. Our sessions are developed and delivered by health professionals from NHS trusts and wider providers across the Thames Valley who work with people receiving treatment for cancer. Today I'm joined again by Dr. Petra Kagleder, counselling psychologist from Berkshire Healthcare Trust, and Petra will be presenting the final part of a three-part talk on psychological wellbeing in cancer. Today's talk follows on from the discussion about the three-system approach, and we'd recommend you watch this part to give yourself an understanding of the three systems that are mentioned in this final part. These sessions are for you, and we want to bring you information that helps you to live with a cancer diagnosis. We hope these sessions are also helpful for friends and family who are supporting someone living with and beyond cancer. If you find this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to our channel so that we can bring you the latest in our health and wellbeing series. Petra, handing over to you for the third part of your talk. Thank you.
I'm Petra Kagleder. I'm counseling psychologist with the Clinical Health Psychology Service for the Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust. And now I would like to talk to you a little bit about tools and strategies for coping and managing the impact of cancer on your well-being. Now, how do we get ourselves into a soothe mode or drive, if that's what's needed? Let me state right at the beginning of what I'm about to say, everybody is an individual. It's really important to remember that, because my soothe could be your threat. So bear that in mind, and perhaps you might want to try out some things and see how it fits you. Now, the following ideas here on this slide, well, this is exactly that, just some ideas that we found helped a fair amount of people. A good starting point, actually, are breathing exercises. Rhythmic breathing can actually be really helpful in calming your nervous system, and it can actually be quite effective. Perhaps you might want to try the following. Take your right hand, put on your chest, your left hand, put on your abdomen. If you want to, close your eyes, and then just for a few minutes, perhaps, quietly sit and pay attention to which hand is moving most. Is it your chest or your abdomen? I would recommend not to change anything for the first few minutes. And just observe which hand is moving most. When you're ready, see whether you can invite your breath into the abdomen. I say invite, not force. Just gently see whether you can coax it into the abdomen to breathe a little bit more deeply. Perhaps you find then your hand on the abdomen is moving a little bit more. And you might want to pause the video at this stage perhaps and then continue. And just see whether you can gently breathe rhythmically in your abdomen. The idea of this exercise really is that when we are under stress and pressure, we tend to breathe more in the chest to get more oxygen in fast. When we are relaxed, we tend to breathe more from the abdomen, abdominal breathing. In tendency, that helps us calm. So when we are under stress, goes to reason that we invite our breath into the abdomen to help us calm. Also, generally, rhythmic breathing. So just everyday breathing, if you pay attention to it, see whether you can establish a rhythm in your breathing for a couple of minutes, perhaps even, that feels soothing. It's not so much whether it's, for example, 3 seconds breath in or 2 seconds out or whatever it is. It's not so important. It's more a matter of a rhythm, basically. That's what I'm talking about. A rhythm, say a breath lasting for 5 seconds in and then 4 seconds out, whatever it is. But keep that regular. Keep that going, keep that regular, and find a rhythm that feels soothing. And practice. Another way to get into the soothe state is muscle relaxation. So there are many ways of relaxing your muscles. For some people, it's a bit of time in the jacuzzi, and other people, it's a massage, but you can do that on your own as well. There are techniques out there called progressive muscle relaxation. And basically, you start with the top of your head and then relax individual muscle groups from top down to the tip of your toes. And you do that by tensing the muscles for a few seconds and releasing. And then go through the entire muscle groups. There's plenty out there on the internet how you can do that. If you don't want to tense and release the muscles for whatever reason, it might be a physical reason, or you might have just had an operation, you can do that also on the out breath. So you focus on a muscle group, for example, your jaw, and on the out breath, release the tension in your muscle. Then you start with your neck, then you go onto your shoulders, and on each out breath, release the tension. And you go from top to bottom. And then there is the everyday garden path variety relaxation. So this is basically paying attention to what you're doing, for example, in the moment. Like, we all have to wash our hands a lot these days, so pay a little bit of attention to what that feels like. Or during a busy day, taking 3 minutes, 5 minutes out, just sitting there, or doing, I don't know, a hobby, or listening to music. Just these little points during your day can make a big difference. I'm not talking here about hours and hours of meditation or going on holiday or something, just short, brief moments of time for yourself where you actually relax rather than spending time in front of the screen or the mobile or whatever. Again, this can make a real difference to your day and to your stress levels. Now, what about then all these worrying thoughts that so many people have to deal with? Again, worries are understandable. If you think about the threat system that I've introduced, it's there to keep us safe. And it will draw our attention to any perceived threats, particularly when we are going through a difficult journey like cancer. But sometimes, particularly when a problem isn't easily solvable, it goes into this loop. It comes round and round and round again, and you might find yourself ruminating on something. And a lot of the times we might not be even 100% sure what it actually is that we are worrying about. So here, perhaps for some folks, it may be a worry tree may be helpful. So here's how it works. You start with trying to really understand what it actually is that you're worrying about. And I would recommend you write that down and really be honest about what that is. It may be, you may think that it is all about, the treatment plan, but perhaps it may be about, for example, fear of recurrence. Just be honest with yourself and write down what it actually is that you're worried about. And then see whether you can ask yourself, is that actually this worry, this problem that I'm having, something I can do something about? In other words, is it in my control or is it not in my control? If it is in your control, then you can sit down and list the options that you can take in order to address the problem. Because you already decided it's something you can do something about. And then the next decision really you have to make is, well, can I do something about this? Can I implement all these options now? If so, you go ahead, you do it now. This is one of those things where procrastination actually can create more worries than it's worth. And then see whether You can let it go, and if the issue is resolved, chances are so has the worry. If you can't do anything about it right now, then it can be helpful to actually develop a plan. So then when the worry comes back, you can perhaps rest a little bit, knowing that, oh yeah, there is this plan, to remind yourself, I have a plan in place, and see whether that eases worries. If you cannot do anything about a particular worry, then that, of course, is a little tricky, because chances are your mind may be still presenting yourself with the worry. Now, if you can let the worry go, some folks can because, they now have defined it, that's wonderful. If you cannot, then perhaps to recognize it for what it is. Oh, here's worry again. Here it is, it's an old story. And then, because you've recognized that what it is a story your mind is giving you right now, but you can't do anything about it, even though your mind is trying to be helpful, acknowledge that and then refocus on what is important in the moment. It is, I feel, certainly worth trying, if you haven't tried it yet, to see whether that helps with the worry a little bit. Another way of helping your well-being when going through cancer and helping you get into soothe and or drive, depending on what's needed, is mindfulness. Now, mindfulness, if you haven't heard about it, it pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's being mindful of the moment. Often, we actually don't notice how much we are thinking and worrying about the future, about the past, about different scenarios that may happen potentially or may not happen. And we can spend a lot of time on autopilot. It's a bit like driving a very familiar route, like say on your daily commute, and then having no recollection whatsoever how you got there, but somehow you got there safely. So that's pretty much the autopilot, and we spend a lot of time on it, and the autopilot can be really helpful. But it also can put us on this hamster wheel of just unreflectively doing things and buying into everything that our mind is telling us. And the problem with that is that when our minds are here, there, everywhere, being pulled in different direction, we can get lost in our thoughts, in our worries, and we can lose sight of what is important to us. And in order to help that, in order to bring us back into the moment, there's a lot and lots of different mindfulness techniques out there, which I would invite you to, Google, look at YouTube. There's many different things you can do. Here, I would like to just briefly introduce 3 different ways of practicing mindfulness. The first one here is what I would call thought watching. There may be a better name for it, but that's what I call it. And again, does what it says on the tin. It is watching your own thinking. Now, if you'd like to try that out, why not just do it right now? So sit in an upright position if you want to. Be comfortable though. And if you can, and if you want to, if it feels safe, close your eyes just for a moment. And again, just for a moment, tune into your breathing. Observe your breath. Don't try to change it. Just pay attention to your breathing without changing it, without judging it. Just for a few seconds. And now I invite you to turn your attention to your inner experience. What is happening in your mind right now? Perhaps nothing other than the sound of my voice. Or there might be all sorts of things going on there. It might be quite busy, might be rather random. Doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter what's occurring. Just observe, as if you were watching a performance on a stage. Try not to analyze or make sense or do anything with these thoughts or emotions or whatever else is going on. Just observe them. And if you do get involved in a thought and it takes you away, great. That is part of the exercise. Just come back, perhaps using your breath as an anchor, and continue observing your thoughts. Okay? So this is just a small introduction to thought watching. You might want to try it. Some people like it, others don't. Now, the idea behind the exercise actually is that if we are able to adopt an observer position, we don't get so involved in our own thinking and can stay more anchored in the present, in the here and now. Over time, the idea is that the practice then will spill into our everyday life and making us realize that a lot of our thoughts and our worries are just something that our protective minds are generating. But we can then choose a little bit more whether we want to buy into it or not. There is another exercise if thought watching isn't for you, and that's a more sensory exercise. And it's basically more, well, it's all sorts of exercises, but I tend to use finger tracing. So you take your hand, right, left, doesn't matter. Take your index fingers and start with your thumb. And then on the in-breath, gently trace up your thumb. Pause for a moment. And on the out-breath, trace down. Breathing in. Pause. Breathing out. Breathing in. Pause. Breathing out. Breathing in. Pause. Breathing out. And again, breathing in. Pause. Breathing out. And then you do the same thing in reverse as often as you need it. This basically, because there's so many nerve endings in your hand, it gives your brain something to focus on other than going away with all sorts of thoughts. So some people find that actually quite helpful. And particularly when feeling a little bit overwhelmed, when it's all a little bit too much, it can be helpful just grounding ourselves back into our bodies. The final mindfulness exercise that I would like to speak about is more the, if you want, everyday mindfulness. I already hinted at it, using things like washing your hands, everyday exercise, and usually we just do it, oh, need to wash hands, and and off we go. But once or twice, maybe during the day, why not go and actually wash your hands and pay attention to what you're actually doing there? Then you open the tap, put your hands under the perhaps cold water, warm water. What's that like? What does this feel like on your hands? The soap, what does it smell like? What does it look like? As you wash your hands, what's the sensation like? And then rinsing and then drying your hands. Pay attention to the details of what that actually is like. Again, this centers you in the moment. And this is just an example, hand washing. It's just because we do it so often these days. You can do the same with cooking. You can do the same with cleaning. You can do the same with typing something. And again, you don't have to do that for long. It's just a couple of minutes, just really paying attention to what actually is going on. Now, dealing with cancer can sometimes feel rather overwhelming, as if it is taking over one's whole life. It can pull us away from what actually matters to us, from what is important in our life. And it certainly can get in the way of at least some of our goals that we have set ourselves. And these are losses. And where there's loss, there may be grief. And some have argued that grief is our mind's way of adjusting to loss and a new reality. So it's okay to grieve. We don't have to pretend that it doesn't matter, because it does. And it's okay to grieve for, goals that may no longer be achievable, or at least not achievable in the time frames and in the way we've envisaged originally, from what we've planned, from how we imagined our life should have played out. And our goals and our ambitions and our dreams, they may change. But our values, what's important to us, need not. So what is important to us? Things like, for some people it is love, for others it's truthfulness, justice, a religious belief, being a good parent or a good colleague, sustainable living, or whatever else is important to you. You are the only judge of that. All of these things can still be important even with or after the cancer. How you go about living these values, that may need to change. But chances are you still will be able to find ways of living this value, being true to yourself and doing the things that are important to you. And as such, your values can be a bit like an anchor, something to ground us in this sea of uncertainty and treatments and decisions and fear and overwhelm. So that's why I feel that taking the time of sitting down and considering, well, what is actually important, that can be really helpful, and to remind ourselves of these values. Now, as I said, the drive system is really important, and it is motivating us to do things and achieve and going out there. But often when patients are going through treatment, and they may become temporarily at least less able to do things. There may be restrictions in terms of movements, for example, an operation, or fatigue, or the chemo brain, as they're sometimes called, nausea after chemotherapy. All of these things, they have an impact, and they can place restrictions on us. And this may mean, actually, understandably, that we rest up a lot and do a lot less when we're feeling ill. And yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? You're feeling terrible, perhaps. So you're trying to do less, and well, you feel like you can't do much more. And as I said, that's entirely understandable, entirely human response. There is a sting in that particular tale, though, and that is that prolonged periods of inactivity can lead our bodies to become what's called deconditioned. So that means that our muscles grow weaker, our tendons become perhaps a little less flexible, and so on and so forth. Our overall fitness decreases. And then, perhaps after a chemo cycle, when there's a break, when we feel better, well, naturally we look around and we feel that, oh, I've got so much to do that I couldn't do whilst I was feeling so ill. And then we are trying to catch up with things. Well, who wouldn't? You know, there's this saying, make hay when the sun is shining. Well, in that case, the sun is shining, so you will do a lot, and then you perhaps overdo it, and then the next day you might feel actually quite terrible. And then that leads perhaps to another period of inactivity, and that leads to more deconditioning, and you can see where this is going. It creates a little bit of a downward spiral, and that's called, amongst other things, boom and bust cycle, for obvious reasons. Now, particularly when it comes to things like, fatigue management and so on, it can be helpful to pace our activities very carefully. So that would mean when we are feeling really, really ill, to perhaps not stop physical activities altogether, if that is possible. It may not be, but if at all possible, see whether you can do a little bit of movement, a little bit of activity. Even a bit is better than nothing at all. So I'm not talking here about attempting to run a marathon or something like that. When I mean movement, just gentle exercise. When we are feeling better, though, that also means that to do what we can, of course, but to do so without causing fatigue or making the pain that you may or may not be experiencing worse. So to basically try to stay on an evenish level. So when we are feeling ill, do a little bit more than you really would like to do because you're feeling terrible. When you're feeling great, do a little bit less. And try, particularly when you're feeling great, try to stick to that, not to overdo things. So instead of this, in terms of your activity, see whether we can make it a little bit more like this. So it's also, I guess, helpful in addition to that to plan in frequent breaks to perhaps manage your energy and kind of try to tame the drive mode a little bit, if that's your thing. So even though it may be frustrating that, for example, the whole room isn't cleared out as you want it to, see whether you can somehow manage to just do a bit of a corner of the room and then have a break. And then when you're ready, go to the next one, just to use that as an example. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Petra. We really appreciate your time in presenting on the series of talks for us. Thank you. And thank you for watching. We really hope you enjoyed Petra's series of talks. We'll include links to the first and second parts of this talk in the description for the video. Please leave your feedback in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on subjects you'd like us to bring you and any questions that we can answer in future sessions. To find out more about the Thames Valley Cancer Alliance, please visit our website. Details are in the description for this video. You can join our mailing list and also find information on how to get involved with the work that we do. Thank you again, and we look forward to bringing you more of the information you want to see.